Hello, class. It's Miss Roberts here, and tonight we're going to explore the final chapter of this course. Now, we've gone through several different types of communication studies subjects and subtopics. We went over just the basics of communication studies, media studies, public communication, interpersonal communication, intercultural communication, and now small group communication. Let's begin. Just a moment. Okay, let me put myself up here. All right. So communication in groups and teams. In this chapter, we're going to review how basic communication skills apply to groups and teams, how we identify potential strengths and weaknesses within groups and teams. We're also going to explore aspects of groups that affect communication, effective group decision-making strategies, and guidelines for effective participation in groups. Now, each group begins with a distinctive role. So we have our social groups, such as a friend group or a special interest group or a meetup group like on meetup.com or a soccer team. We also have personal growth groups. So say if you're in a group therapy session or you're in an exercise group or a meditation yoga group. And then we have task-oriented groups, similar to the one that you're in now as a student, or your work groups. Now, this might be Captain Obvious, but let's go ahead and define what a group is. It's more than one person, so that's solo. It's more than two people, because two people, that's a dyad or a pair. So in order to have a group, you have to have three or more people. Now, how large a group can be, that depends. Now, I teach small group communication at the community college level. So, depending on the context, a small group can be between 3 and 12 people. And the more people you have, the more control you have to have over the group. The smaller the group is, there's advantages to that as well. So, the magic number for a more effective small group would be under 12. But if we're not talking about small groups, then sky's the limit, depending on talking about groups of people or corporations and teams. But when we're thinking about teams and effective group leadership, say if we do have a large group within a department, more so than not, that larger group might be divided into committees. It reminds me of my time at Cal Poly. I was in a small, excuse me, I was in a event planning course as a senior. And of course, our class is one big group, but we were divided into committees to put on communication studies days. It was a day that this class put on. We had speakers, we had people show up, and it allowed the underclassmen a chance to get to know who's communication studies, who were the students in communication studies, and ask questions. So it was a really fun event. So in a group, the people must interact, be interdependent, meaning we're dependent on each other for success, have a common goal, and share some rules of conduct. One of your assignments in your groups that you were assigned is the group contract. I assigned the group contract to serve several purposes. You will get the group together. You'll know who's participating because you'll have to collaborate on your first assignment. It's an easy assignment that you guys can do. You can agree on the rules of engagement in your own group. You can even provide a name for your group. So in that assignment, you will be interacting, be interdependent, have a common goal, and share some rules of conduct. I'll be filming a separate video defining what the group project is. So we're going to focus on the slides for now. So a team is a special kind of group. So we're going from general to specific. There are different complementary resources of the members. Think of like a work team, a task force, and we are trying to pair people up, or excuse me, select the types of people that we want for a certain task. So with the team, we have a particular goal in mind, and we are using the strengths of each team member, and each team member is compensating for the weaknesses of others. And there's a strong sense of collective identity as well in teams. But there are potential limitations of groups. Some of us might prefer to work alone versus working in groups, but it's really important to understand why learning to work in groups is important, especially as we explored careers in the beginning of the semester. You may, or more than likely, will be asked to collaborate with others. So, how do we collaborate effectively? That's why we have sections just like this in this class, or there might be other classes that address group communication or collaboration. At the community college level, and at CUSB, there's also a small group communication class. There's a whole class dedicated to groups and how they interact with each other. So it's pretty important. But there are some limitations of groups. For example, there might be more time needed for a group process. Some people have different paces of work. Some people might need help identifying strengths, identifying weaknesses, and just getting the work checked over and turned in on time. It's really easy when you are responsible for a certain body of work, but now we are collaborating and we're all responsible. So we have to make sure that we are all responsible in this process. It has potential to suppress individuals or encourage conformity. So there's some uniformity that might be needed in the presentation of an assignment. Written assignments should be in a more uniform format. But within the process, we also want to use the strengths of a group by allowing people to freely express ideas, to vote on ideas. We're going to explore that a little bit more in group decision making, but we don't want to discourage people from saying their points of view. Then we also have social loafing. That's when members of a group exert less effort than they would have if they worked alone. So if it depends all on you, you will work as hard as you can for that project or that grade. But if other people might take this as an opportunity to not work as hard because they may know that someone else might work harder for them. So social loafing can be a big problem. But there are also strengths in groups. There are greater resources. More ideas can come about. Two heads, three heads, four heads, five heads, etc. are better than one. You might have heard this as a buzzword that we make fun of, but there is also synergy. It is the collective vitality that enhances the energies, talents, and strengths of the individual members. So, with all of our cylinders working as it should, it makes us greater and brings the whole group to its maximum potential. There's also heightened creativity and enhanced commitment to decisions because others are committed to the project as well. You don't want to be known as the person holding the group back, which motivates you to work more efficiently. So let's explore some more features of small groups. There should be some cohesion, but to a certain extent. right? We're collaborating and we're focusing on this one main goal, which is a good thing. However, we also want to make room for individual thoughts and for us to disagree a little bit. But through that conflict, we were able to bring out new ideas. So we want to avoid groupthink. It's when group members cease to think critically and be uniform. So that's different than people unanimously coming to a decision. But if you are inside disagreeing with a decision, but you feel like you can't express yourself because of repercussions um, or pushback from the group, then that occurs as groupthink, which is a problem. Then we also have power. So there might be a group leader, there might be a boss in charge of the team. So they have the ability to influence others. They have the ability to power over, to use that power to help or harm people in the group, or power to use that leadership ability to empower others to succeed. And then there's social climbing, an attempt to increase personal status by winning the approval of high status members. So this dynamic can be a mixed bag because we want to encourage people to form bonds and to network. So I don't want you to not do that, especially as we went over the career chapters a few weeks ago. But we want to make sure it doesn't turn into just social climbing when the goal of networking seems too transparent and not genuine. So you want to make those bonds a little bit genuine, at least for the time being of you working on the project. So there's a thin line between networking and social climbing. But networking is good, being seen is good, but you just don't want to be phony about it, if that makes sense. Then there's other interaction patterns within the group. There might be centralized power or centralized communication patterns when one or two people hold central positions and information is funneled to that person or pair. So there might be someone in the middle leadership position or just two of the more outspoken members relaying information. Then there's decentralized, when there's a balance of communication and the group members have equal power. Speaking of power, there are 5 bases of power. A power base is the sum of the resources you can use to control and influence others. First, there's legitimate power. These people are elected or appointed or selected to be a leader, to be the head of the committee or the team. There's also referent power. So there's people with charisma, people who others are drawn to. So they have an easier time influencing others and have that sway in making decisions. Then there's expert power. So this is the people who have information, expertise, and people follow what expertise is. Reward and coercive power. So the reward power is the ability to award behaviors, bonuses, money. You think about stickers in school versus coercive power, the ability to punish behaviors. Next, we have methods of group decision making. We have the nominal group technique, where there are several ways that, or several steps in the process where a group can make a decision. So we have individual input, and that can lead to a final decision. First, we have the introduction and explanation of the task that's to be decided or the decision that's to be decided on. You might write down a silent generation of ideas, share them to the group, discuss the options that the group may have, and then vote or rank. So with the voting or ranking, majority wins, or the decisions with the higher number in the ranking will be implemented. Then we have the standard agenda type of decision making where a problem is defined. Then there's research and we've gathered evidence and information about the problem. Establish criteria for a solution. So which courses of action can we choose from to best solve the problem? Generate and evaluate solutions. So it's the brainstorming process between the group members. Select and then implement the best solution, then monitor the problem. So with these steps, it's not necessarily just about the ranking or the best idea wins. We are thinking about pros and cons. It might take a little bit longer, but it may be a little bit thorough. And the final part is to monitor the decision, which leaves it open to change in the future. Next, we're going to talk about the 3 types of communication within groups. First, we have communication climate, which encourages members to contribute and evaluate ideas. So you want to make sure to have a communication climate that is open and that allows us to brainstorm general ideas, or if we disagree, have constructive conflict. Then there's procedural, when we have communication that helps us stay on task, such as agendas, comments, talk about the group progress, etc. Task, just giving information and analyzing ideas. We want to make sure that we're not egocentric in communication as well, where we're self-centered, but sometimes with egos getting in the way, power dynamics, sometimes that comes out. But also with the different types of decision making that was mentioned earlier, that contributes to the type of communication that groups come across. So they're trying to figure out what problems are arising and how to solve them, what's the best way to solve them, etc. So guidelines to help with group communication. You want to provide leadership, maintain a good communication climate with your teammates, manage conflict constructively. There's disruptive conflict where it doesn't push towards further dialogue or make the group better. Could be about ego, maybe just liking the other person, making or maybe making accusations of social loafing, but it doesn't get fixed. It might get defensive. So that can be examples of disruptive conflict where the conflict doesn't move the group along and it disrupts what the group is doing or what's going on. Then we have constructive conflict. There might be disagreements of how to pursue a certain course of action, but in this case, these are discussed, voted on, evaluated, and there might be disagreement, but eventually the resolutions of these conflicts move the project further. And just like we talked about before, we want to avoid groupthink. Doing so might bring about constructive conflict just because we might express our ideas that someone else disagrees with, but that's okay. Conflict is just not, it's not necessarily someone being mad at each other, but it's an exchanging of ideas that they might not agree on initially, but they might agree on later. And with constructive conflict, it furthers the goal of the team. So in summary, we talked about what small groups are, how they operate, talk about the factors that influences teams and groups, and guidelines of how to be an effective group member. Now for the group project, I will be filming a separate video defining what that is. I mentioned the group contract briefly just as an example, but you'll also be coming together to do video presentation and research paper presentation about a communication studies topic. Of course, ask me any questions if you have any questions. Thank you so much and have a good evening. Bye.